Welcome. If you were looking for Elmo Wick information, you have come to the right place. We're going to do a little more, well, we're going to do a lot more kind of talking and discussing and that sort of thing. And this one, we really worked you hard the last couple of Zoom sessions we did. We did lots of tunes. And so this time you can kind of just relax and jot down questions, thoughts that you might have. We'll have some time at the end for some conversation. But my name is Mary Pat Kleven. If you don't know me, although I think I know everybody. Woo! I tell you, cool. All right, Mary Pat Kleven. I am joined by Walter Sigtermans, our new president of the MSFA,
Hello.
and Carla Manning, who has also worked on this project. And I think Jeanette, you must be one of the phone numbers, right? Jeanette, you're one of them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Hey, Jeanette. So Jeanette's joining us by phone. So the four of us worked on what we called the Elmo Wick project 10 years ago. And I realized it all started showing up in my Facebook feed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, has it been 10 years since we did the project? And I thought it would be fun. We talked about doing workshops. And I said, it'd be really fun just to talk about what have we done in 10 years since the project? Kind of what have we learned? We kind of and kind of reintroduce the project to people who maybe weren't around when we were doing all this Elmo Wick stuff. So if you're not familiar with Elmo Wick was born in 1924 in Sunburg, Minnesota. That's in west central Minnesota. And he played this to a very musical family. His grandfather played the hardanger, and his father played the standard fiddle. They were from Hallingdal, Norway, so very Norwegian farmers. And they he got his first fiddle when he was 12. And so I don't look a bit older. Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
I feel every year of it. And so he played. In fact, he was by the time he was a young adult, he was playing in dance bands. In one of the interviews, he said he was playing like 5 nights a week until he got married and he got a job at the highway department, the Kandiyohi County Highway Department. And he said he's working, the shifts were too long and he's married, they're raising a family. He just couldn't do it. So he kind of gave up the fiddle until 1971 when he broke his leg. And so it's like he was bored. So he picked up the fiddle again. And by 1980, he was in retirement. And so he just went, just immersed himself back into the fiddling. So kind of took a break there, but, immersed himself. So how we got involved is he was he when he retired, he also got a beat up hardanger fiddle, put it all together. He said it was in 46 pieces, and he put it all back together and played it. I have no idea how you would do that, but I'm impressed already. Anyway, so he put it back together and played it. He also spearheaded the effort to form the Minnesota State Fiddlers Association. So we are all here because Elmo just had that kind of foresight. And he also taught himself how to read and write music in his 50s, in his retirement, so that he could write down the tunes that he remembered from his younger years, from his family and his neighbors. And so that all these tunes would be preserved because he said in his interviews, and his son told me in when we were doing the project, that Elmo was very, very concerned that these tunes would be lost. He just really felt like this was music that had to be preserved, and so that was just really his passion. So he gave all of his sheet music, all this handwritten music, he gave it to the Minnesota State Fiddlers Association. It was in several boxes. It filled my car. And so when I became president, I got a call from the wife of the past president, who said, come over to the house, have a cup of coffee, and take all this music. So I had no idea what she was talking about. And so I fill up the car with this stuff and I drag it all back, to my apartment in the Twin Cities. And my husband's like, "What's this?" I'm like, our new roommate, stacking all up in the corner. And any rate, it's the irony was I had finished up a project called Jumpstart Your Fiddle. So where a lot of people got to know the Fiddle Association. We were doing just basically teaching. If you'd ever learned anything about a fiddle, come and join us. We'll give you some workshops, free things. And we did some fun stuff. Any rate, so I just finished up that one as an individual artist. And so the Arts Council had said, oh, you're interested in doing another one? And I'm just like, so
Mhm.
no, thank you. So right after I'd had that conversation with the program director, I ended up with all these boxes of tunes, and I had to call her back and say, "So, remember how I said I did? Remember how I didn't want to do a grant? So I got all this music. Is this something you might be interested in?" And she goes, "Oh, absolutely." I said, "Well, we got to figure out what we got, and then I will be calling you back." So it took us a year to figure out what we had. We did had to go through all of the boxes. We had to figure out what it was that we thought was important. We had to do a lot of sorting. We had to know what was just, we wanted to do more unique tunes. We had to come up with sort of a focus of the grant. Because basically what we could get was a grant from the state fiddle from the state arts board. It had to be an individual artist grant because the Fiddle Association wasn't eligible to apply. And so I had to do it as an artist, but we had to have a lot of focus. We had to just know what we were doing. So, any rate, so we took about a year to do all that. And we had to sort everything, which is what Jeanette got to do, was to do a lot of the sorting. But we had to figure out, so we boiled, and we had to figure out what we could do in 9 months because they gave you the amount of money and you had exactly 9 months to get it done. So we picked the tunes. So some people afterwards said, "Well, why did you do this or do that or whatever?" It's like, hey, man, 9 months. Got 9 months. Right. Clock was ticking. And they were serious, man. You had to get it done. So we got the tunes, we got the tune book, we did 3 workshops throughout the state. We hired fiddlers, we MSFA members, each took a tune or two, recorded them, we threw them up on YouTube, wrote the final report, got the money, whatever. Phew, and we were done, and we got it done in 9 months. So any rate, but it was a really intense project, but it was really a very unique kind of a project as well. And we did all the historical research, and Walter's going to talk a little bit about that as well. So then after that, we realized we took a breath, and then we said, well, you know what? There were a lot of tunes we kind of left on the floor, right? That we wanted to do. So Walter then took that on, and he got volunteers, and I think that I see a lot of familiar faces, a bunch of people that took that on and just recorded some tunes, put them on YouTube. And Walter and Scott Gamble did a lot of the ABC transcription, and so we ended up with volume 2. And that was just a completely volunteer project, just so we could put the music up there. At any rate, so we got all of that done, and then I got started to get really nervous about the fact that I have these cases. I have 2 huge cases of handwritten music from Elmo Wick in my attic. So basically, it could be, um, you know, fire, flood, the roof leaks, whatever. And I don't have this music. So I started to get really nervous about this. So Jeanette, bless her heart, I said, we need someone to scan it. So Jeanette scanned it. 582 pages she scanned, and we've put it up on a Google Drive, along with whatever recordings we had, and along with the historic research that Walter has done. And we kind of keep adding all of that. So, and then Jeanette also did a table of contents. So the project didn't really stop with the grant. We kind of have kept working away at this stuff. So kind of our next thing will be to find a home for it but right now it's safe and cozy, and it's Google Drive, and members can access that. So, and it's fun kind of research. It's fun to see all of his handwritten kind of stuff. So people want to do some research, they can do that. So that is what the project was. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to give Walter and Carla and Jeanette a chance to kind of chime in and talk about, because we really were, man, we were fast and furious. And then I want to talk a little bit about things that I have learned about from Elmo Wick. What did I learn about the project, about Upper Midwest music and stuff, having done all that, what I've learned in the last 10 years in 20 minutes. I get it done in 20 minutes. So at any rate, so I had questions for Carla and for Jeanette. And the question that I asked them to ponder was, what surprised or impressed you about the project? So I posed that question to all 3 of them. So I'm not sure. Carla, did you want to start on that one? What did you find? From when you started, like what surprised you or impressed you when you were working on the
What
project?
impressed me about the project? Well, I don't know. I guess the thing that impressed me the most was, well, one thing was his collection. But I guess what impressed me most about Elmo was that he learned the notation to write all that stuff down. I think that's pretty amazing. I've mentioned to quite a few people since then. It's just like to learn that and write them all down, get it done. That was pretty cool on his part. So, but
And I'd have to agree with that one because I have to think about it. It's like because he's sitting down in his, later years and he's remembering tunes from as a kid and then he's writing them down. I mean,
yeah,
this is a gift, right? This
well,
the more I ponder
he's
this.
learning it and writing it down after all his years.
Yeah,
And now
right.
he told me he got an old Hardanger in 46 pieces. That's kind of amazing too.
I
I'm
know.
not
I
surprised, but
yeah. So so yeah, yeah, no kidding. It was just kind of impressive. And I know, Carla, you spent a lot of time because his notation had to be corrected, right? And he was the first one to admit in his interviews that he was not a, that it was hard for him to learn how to do this and write it. So I
well,
think you worked a lot on correcting it because it was like, it's a waltz, 4 beats in a measure. Let's figure this, let's
yeah,
figure this
yeah.
out.
Or 3.5 beats.
Three and a
Well,
half beats in a measure. Okay, where are we going
I'm
with
still
this?
trying to trying to get a hold of that one that says bad spelling, and I don't know if you guys thought it was a title, but I'm thinking I don't think so. I think that he was saying he knew he bad spelled that piece of paper, but
Yeah, I tell
yeah,
you. Yeah,
but
he did. Yeah, his spelling was a bit of a challenge. His spelling in English and his spelling in Norwegian. So that was the best part. So we looked up stuff to get it translated, and we couldn't. The translator says we don't know what you're talking about. So
and I guess the only other comment that I wanted to say was, I Jeanette had just moved back from outstate, and she was living with me for a short time, and the timing could have been better because I tell you, I would have been too distracted with all the tunes. you know, I would have
yeah,
been playing them all instead of, I wouldn't have been able to sort them like she did. She was amazing. So,
yeah. That's the first thing we did is I took him
yeah.
over to your house, and you and Jeanette, Jeanette had him in the basement, just kind of sort. So
We had them on my dining room table for quite a long
yeah,
time. Yeah,
yeah, just to because there's so many of them. We just kind of,
yeah,
like I said, to know what we had. Because he also wrote down just a lot of popular tunes and just common tunes and he
yeah.
just wrote down his whole collection. And he also then photocopied it. So he'd make copies for each one of his gig books. So he'd have a gig book. And so there were multiples. So then she had to figure out the multiples and do a table of contents and figure out what we had. So it's a bit of a project. So so Jeanette, did you want to chime in? You can unmute yourself and chime in. Do you know how to unmute yourself? No, no.
Oh, I think I thought she's done it before, but I'm gonna try and text her, see if she can.
Yeah, see if you can. Yeah. Walter, what surprised or impressed you?
Ah, surprised or impressed me. Yeah, the amount of music that he had, and also to find out that we only had a fraction because he had given stuff to the Hardanger Fiddle
Yeah.
Association of America. There is another chunk of music which he wrote out and he gave to them, and that's kind of their private stock. It's their secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't know that till later. That's right. What do you mean there's more?
There's more out there.
Oh my gosh. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also just the amount of people that he encountered, because you had these two periods. He played in the 1930s and into the 40s, and then he had another life. But he knew all of these old timers, these older players that
hmm
he had learned from. So you had him sort of covering the turn of the century, 1890s, 1900. So he had the old teaching, and then in the 70s, there's kind of a reemergence of folk music that came about, and he was a part of that. So you had two separate communities, two separate groups of people, and trying to figure out, oh, okay, these are the older people, and then the next generation later that came
hmm
in the
hmm
1970s, and
Yep.
piecing that together,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was so connected
Mm-hmm.
both with this really small community in the 1920s, 1930s, 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping that story separate from this later group where he's going all the way into North Dakota and to
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin and talking with all these other people and
Mm-hmm.
playing with them.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. That makes sense. Looks like we've got Jeanette back. So Jeanette.
Hi, can you hear
Hi
me now?
there. I can hear you. I can hear you. So what surprised or impressed you about the project? You were the one who was like really dealing with all these massive amounts of pages of sheet music.
Right. Carla was right in the fact that I had just moved back from out of state, and I'm actually a viola player, and wasn't really into what I used to call yeehaw or any type of bluegrass or old time music. And I was not a fiddle player, and so I did not get distracted from the tunes. I was enchanted by the history, along with Walter, and yeah, the notes that he wrote. The memories that he wrote, you can see some of the notes that he wrote if you check out the sheets. And you're right, Mary Pat, there was multiple copies. And you're right, Carla, there was lots of weird spellings. And I just made that table of contents and called it exactly as it was on the sheet of paper. What impressed me about him specifically, I mean, I realized that he was retired, but he certainly didn't slow down, right? The amount of time that it must have taken him to do that it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, it makes me tired just thinking of it. So
Makes me feel like I sit on my butt all day long.
so we should be inspired. We should be inspired, right? So Walter, let's move on to the historical research. You did a lot of the historical research, and I think there's some people who might be interested to know exactly how you tackled that, because I know sometimes people come up and say, "Well, I want to know more about this tune," or "How do you know more about this tune?" And you figured out a whole lot of ways of finding that information.
Yeah, can I show some things?
Yeah, I made you co-host, so you should be able to share.
Oh,
Can you
so I
share?
can.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for the share button.
Oh,
More words, no.
should be right
Wait.
down on the bottom, a green button that says share.
And sharing, maybe. All participants, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do
Co-hosts can share, right?
oh, there we go.
Okay,
Window, and I can choose a window. What window do I want? I want this one.
There we go. Okay.
Let's go back. So, yeah. So there I don't know if you can see the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So Minneapolis, St. Paul is here. And he was from Kandiyohi, which is, here in just south of the middle of the state. Stearns County is where St. Cloud is. And it's kind of important to know what county, if you're looking for death certificates, and also figuring out newspapers, what newspapers are most local. So Wilmer is down here at the southern end of Kandiyohi, and Sunburg is right next to Swift County. And I've got a different map that sort of shows. So there's Minneapolis. You go due west 120 miles and you end up in Wilmer. And Kandiyohi sort of, I think it goes all the way up to Bruton there. And Benson is there in Swift County. So, yeah, a lot of the information I got was from Wilmer newspaper. There was also, for a period of time, a newspaper in New London. Let's start this at the beginning. So geography was kind of important here in figuring out some of this music. So we'd get a piece of music, Uncle Hovel Wig, was a member of the Flolo Players and played 1890s to 1920s. This is one example of his writing, his notes on there. And of course, Hovel is not spelt Hovel. It was Havel. So you had to be kind of, what do you say? You had to sort of work around some of the spelling issues, but you could sort of sound it out and figure it out. We just had so many names. Here you've got Havel Wig, and you have Ole Flolo, and then there's a Carl Flolo. And what I ended up doing was, just because we had so many names, just try and go through a website called Find a Grave. And I would go off and start looking to just go through the names and say, okay, can I find somebody who this could be, and where were they married, or where were they buried? So it was like, oh, West Norway Lake Lutheran Cemetery, Sundberg. Okay, this must be the guy. So I kind of work my way through the list and try and figure out, okay, can I find a grave for this person? And then my next thing was, well, when did they die? And I really wanted the exact date. It's not so important now, but at that point I really needed the exact death date, because what I did then, if I couldn't get that, is I went to the Minnesota Historical Society and went down into the library, the Gale Library, and I've spent a lot of time in this library, going through, first looking for death certificates, because the death certificate could get me. This is Havel Wig. There we go. There's Havel Wig. So I could find the death certificate, which gave me his actual death date, which is now good if I want to go and find his obituary, or at least a death notice. So I'd go back into the archives again and look through newspapers that were nearby where this guy died, and try and find what newspaper might have his obituary. And I've got one example of an obituary, one and only one. I wasn't going to bore you with too many of them, but it was like every week or two I was sending Mary Pat and another obituary or another gravestone, and it's like, Mary Pat, look what I found. So that was, you're president and I'm a heartbeat away, and I'm sending you obituaries and gravestones. So yes. Oh well. It wasn't done in a mean way. I was really truly excited about finding these things. So sometimes they had really good information. Here's an example where they have a lot of information. Some of them they didn't have so much. One of the things that I was really looking for was who was surviving, and who were the descendants. Were there any children? Were there any grandchildren? If there were daughters, what were their married name? And then what I started doing, I could start asking for photographs, or start searching for those descendants and say, hey, have you got any photographs? Do you have any stories to tell? So that's where things started getting much more interesting, was actually going out and talking to people and trying to get real information. I wanted to repeat again that in the last 10 years since we did this project, it has gotten so much easier to do this, because a lot of these well, not all of them, but a lot of newspapers are being digitized by the Minnesota Historical Society. So you can actually go online from the comfort of your own little practice room or wherever you set up your computer, and you can go through and run queries against the newspapers and find people's obituaries or any mention of them. So there's a lot of information that you can now get right from the comfort of your own home. One of the other things I did was I found the Farmer's Directory. So from 1915. And that was kind of useful because I could find some of those names of some of the farmers. They gave what plot they lived at. So, oh, look, there's an OE rhyme. You just start looking for names in the area around Sunburg, and I started coming up with some names and the location of where they lived, which section, how many acres. But things really kicked into high gear. I was in Wilmer, in the Wilmer Historical Society, and they had a big wall map from 1927, and it gave just incredible detail. So the Wicks were here. Havelwig is right here. Well, actually, I started highlighting some of these. So Jorgensen was here. There's a Gilbert rhyme. There's an Ole rhyme. There's an Ole O'Flolo over here. And starting piecing together where all of these people were in relationship to where Elmo was when he grew up. And it was like, oh, now I've really got something to work with. So I could also go and start hunting for some of the houses. So I had a couple of excuses to go out and take some field trips, and I visited Sunburg and saw where some of the houses were. I went and saw Bruton, and sort of like, okay, I know where these places are. I know where these people lived. I found where the Henshin house used to be by Henshin Lake, and that's actually now a part of the Sibley State Park. So, and there again, sadly, I tried to get a hold of Phyllis Bach, but she had just died like a year or two before this project started. But that's where I came up with this map and said, well, here's where the Sagadals were, here's where the Whigs were, here's where the Wicks were, and here's where the Henshins were. And it was like, oh, wow, that was the early childhood neighborhood. And then as he got older, he started, associating with, well, there's Elmo was in Bruton, there's Sunburg, the Keldals, the Ericksons, the Amundsons, Cliff Gandrud, some of the people that he was playing with in the 1970s. So sort of piecing that together. The other thing, books. I found a few books that were great sources of information. There's stuff that has actually been published. There was a fellow by the name of John Boehmer. He put out two books, Bruton 1886, 1896, or 1886 to 1986. Those were the days, my friend. There was a publication by the Hardanger Fiddle Association. They have something that they put out called the Soundpost. And there was some mention of some Sagadal instrument that was there. There was another book called Where the Buffalo Fish Abound, Pictorial History of Kandiyohi, which was published in 1994. That was kind of cool because there again, I got a picture. Oh, actually, the big thing about that, I couldn't figure out who Morris Cargo was. And then that book actually made me realize that it wasn't Cargo, it was Chargo. So some of the stories started making sense and there was more connections. And then there was another one, Bruton Characters of the Last Millennium. But some of these had really good information of, really fine, detailed information. Let's see. So I got to drive around and sort of visit the area. The thing that's kind of interesting, Minnesota is mostly flat, except for down in the south, the southern part. Most of Minnesota is just flat, except for this one little area. There was a big iceberg that came through the state and plowed everything flat, and it stopped right at where Sibley State Park is. And because of that, there's what they call the Alexandria Moraine, which is a set of hills sort of in the middle of Minnesota flatness. It sort of runs between Wilmer and Detroit Lakes. And that's where all the Norwegians stayed when they started moving in the 1880s. They found that kind of nice, little hills you could get into. So I kind of experienced that area where and this is similar to down in Wisconsin. You've got the area where it's the same sort of thing. It's a moraine. And there again, the Norwegians seem to like hiding in those little hills there. Acton, which is 1862 when the Dakota War started. That's also was a really major part of the history of that area. And you get a piece like Crow Country Waltz, which Elmo wrote, and I think that was pertaining to, or a little nod to the Dakota Wars and, Chief Little Crow. The other thing, of course, is if you're going to talk Norwegians in Minnesota, everyone seems to come around to the Kensington Runestone, which got me out there to take a look at, the Kensington, the Oman farm in Kensington. And then if you go to Alexandria, they still have the Kensington Runestone itself on display. So it was also kind of fun because I ended up recording one of the tunes at the museum there. They have some log cabins, and that worked out really nice. And probably the most fun that I had was I tried my hand at playing a hardanger. Let's see. What can I say about that? I went to Farwell Hall, Folklore Village, and I took some hardanger lessons from the Hardanger Fiddle Association America. And it took me about a day to adjust to the fact that the strings are a little bit closer to each other. The other thing that they do is the G string is usually tuned up to an A. So it's A, D, A, E. And that wasn't too bad either. I spent some time in advance. I took one of my fiddles because I have more than one, and I tuned one of them A, D, A, E and played some of the tunes on it just to get used to the fingering. And that actually wasn't too bad. The thing is, it made my instrument, when it was tuned A, D, A, E, it sounded different. It really does change the whole sound of your instrument. Just that the harmonics of the instrument kind of change a bit. It's worth an experiment if you have a spare fiddle, just take one and cross tune it. And another thing worth noting, this was the group that I was playing with. I was able to. They have a lending program where you can borrow or rent an instrument for the week. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday event, and we eventually played for some dancing in Farwell Hall, which was a lot of fun. But the other thing about these hardanger, the A string is not actually tuned to A440. It's more tuned to like 466, which is essentially a B flat. So this gets kind of interesting because if you have your normal fiddle and you're playing with a hardanger, and they're both tuned the way you'd normally tune it, where the violin is 440A and the hardanger is 466. You are going to have to play in B flat if the hardanger is playing in the key of A. Right. So, and this was sort of made me wonder a bit if what Elmo was doing with some of these tunes that are tuned to B flat was to allow fiddlers to play along with hardangers. So, and let's see, what else can I say? Another one I was told was that the hardangers, and maybe this was laziness, but I don't think so. They say usually they play strictly in first position. So when we had the Henshin Lake Schottish, literally I had to go up into third position to play some of those higher notes. You play it and then you go up an octave. And I wondered if Elmo had in fact changed, he may have remembered it, but moved it up an octave to make it more impressive as a contest piece. So that was, and like I said, he was active. There was a number of articles that he wrote. There was music that Elmo had put out for the Hardanger Association. And let's see, it was just it was very informative to have actually tried playing hardanger. I have no Norwegian blood, but it was fun to go and try it and experience it. Let's see, one of the other things that I did was probably last minute. The last person that I contacted was Oliver Sagadal's daughter. And it was like the last minute. So I had gone, it was getting down to the deadline for putting the book out. And I had set up a meeting to visit Oliver's daughter, Joan. And I showed up, and she had a wealth of information. She had photographs of the whole family. She had a homemade, her great-grandfather, Oliver Sagadal's grandfather. I can't remember now the name now. I'm drawing a blank, and I should have it right at the tip of my tongue. One of the Sagadals, Elling Sagadal, was a hardanger maker of some repute. I mean, he was like really top of the line hardanger maker. And she had one of his instruments from the 1890s, which was kind of cool to see. So I had to photograph that and photograph the photographs. And she showed me a couple of books, and she had some stories, and I'm like writing stuff down. And I remembered I had like 2 hours with her, and I got back to the car, and I'm in the car, and I'm just shaking, and I'm trying to text Mary Pat. It's like, you wouldn't, it was like, if you've ever seen All the President's Men, where you have Dustin Hoffman coming back, and I'm running on 20 cups of coffee, and I've got little pieces, scraps of newspaper, tissue, and matchbook covers. I'm taking notes, and I've got all this information, and I'm trying to type it into my cell phone and then send it off to Mary Pat. It's like, this gal has so much information. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. All right.
About it.
Okay, thank you. So you can see that the you want to unshare, you can unshare. There you go.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing. That's it. It's not unshare. Great. Yeah. So clearly, I sent everybody in the chat. You have the complete Elmo Wick, so you can see the maps, the pictures, the stories. Kind of how this all came together. But it looks so simple. Like, you're right. Walter just made it look really easy for everybody. So all right, I want to kind of quickly go through. I got a PowerPoint here. All right. I'm screen sharing. Okay.
Is this book the deliverable that you did? That you just sent us?
Yes, I actually, just 1 second. Come, slideshow start. How do, oh my gosh, how do from the beginning. There we go. Okay. Yes. So what you got was because I said we did the first project, then Walter did the second one. So I've added that together. The other thing that we realized was that Elmo himself had put together a book, handwritten, of the ones that he really liked. So we got that, of course, after the project, right? So so at any rate, so we put them all together. So what you have is a rather large compendium of, so you have some of the stuff in his handwriting as well as both the first and second volume. So you've got quite a few tunes. All right, so here's a picture of Elmo hard at work doing his stuff here. I gotta kind of move everyone out of the way here. All right, so here's some of the things that I felt like because I've really immersed myself a lot into this Upper Midwest fiddling, and so one of the things that I were some aha moments that I had as I continued working after the Elmo Wick project was first of all understanding why it is that we have kind of this unique style up here. And here's this map, I think really helps a lot. This is Norwegian immigration in the area. And you can see that we have a lot of Norwegians that came in the late 1800s to the area. And they all stayed. That's the most impressive part. So it's not just that we had Norwegians coming to the area. We had Norwegians that stayed for multiple generations, and they brought their fiddles and they kept their traditions, and those traditions continued to kind of morph and change. And so I think that's one of the things that I realized is that we really do have a distinct kind of we have a distinct culture in this area because of that influence. I also am getting a sense, and this I think needs more study, but I do think we have some kind of regional styles in the Upper Midwest. And this is my cheesy map. I should have asked Walter to help me. He does such a better job. But I kind of sense in terms of regional styles that we have all the Finns up in the Upper Peninsula. We talked about that at our last session. We have the Scandinavians in the driftless area. That's my squiggly line there. That whole driftless. We've got kind of a whole group of people there. Finseth, Sherber, and Goose Island Ramblers. And then we also have this northern Minnesota, with can people mute? I'm hearing a little bit of chatter with the northern Minnesota, the Canadian influence. And then you see that little blue dot there, and that's Elmo. So he's kind of in his own little area. So it is an area that's different than some of the areas that we're studying and getting information from. The other that I'm really beginning to appreciate, we started to see this with the Elmo Wick project, and I don't think we knew what we were seeing. And the more I'm playing this and the more I'm talking to people and more I'm learning, I'm realizing that what we have as a style is called creolization, which is that is a $10 word if I ever heard one. But basically, it means putting together of styles to create a new one. And here's an example. So creolization can be things like taking a reel and playing it as a polka, and that's the example with Logger's Breakdown. It can be hop waltzes that became polkas, mazurkas that got smoothed out and became waltzes. A lot of ragtime tunes became two-steps, Hardanger tunes adapted to the standard fiddle. Fiddlers using phrases from music heard on the radio or from other fiddlers, either consciously or unconsciously, and incorporating it into new tunes. So here's a couple of quick examples just from the Elmo Wick project. This is a great one because this is Logger's Breakdown. A Logger's Breakdown is typically played as a reel and as a Canadian reel. In this case, it is played as a polka, so it's a slightly different tempo. I even found a lick from Logger's Breakdown in a schottisch in the Johann Soling book out of Decorah, Iowa. So clearly this whole idea of taking it and then playing, it's the same tune, but playing it with a different kind of a style. Here's an example with Crow Country Waltz that it is, I don't know whether Elmo knew he was doing this or it was one of those unconscious things, but the first phrase of the first A part of Crow Country Waltz musically lyrically, not rhythmically, but lyrically, is almost identical to the A part of the last waltz by Howdy Forrester, who was on the Grand Ole Opry. So whether Elmo was listening to the Grand Ole Opry and just, and just heard this or liked the lick and he threw it in with Crow Country Waltz, the B part is different. It is the same key. The rhythm is quite different, and Crow Country Waltz definitely sounds very Scandinavian, but that's an example of kind of that creolization of taking one and throwing it into another. Um, I also have I also felt like keys and tuning were a little more fluid than I thought. Um, the musical groups were larger with more diverse instruments, and so then the Appalachian that we're used to, that a lot of us were more familiar with. So it's a bigger group, and they could adapt to more keys. So we were playing in more keys than we would see in some other, musical styles that maybe we'd all been more familiar with. Um, and I have changed. I got to go back. I changed. Oh, God, I got to go back. Oh no, come on back. No. Oh shoot. Go back. Go back. Go back. It won't let me go back. Oh no. Oh yeah, I can go back. All right, so I changed my mind. And this was the tune that Walter was referring to, where it was played in the key of A, and Elmo took it up an octave. And so I knew that not everyone would want to play in the third position. So when we did the book, I rewrote some things just so that it would all be in first position, just for people who would be more comfortable in that. And it was not long ago that Jason Buzneski, who's an ethnomusicologist out of Milwaukee, said, you could have just put it in D. And I was like, huh. Well, what do you know? How about that? So you're right. So here it is in D, and I played it in D, and it's like, man, I really like how it sounds in D. And I learned this, and I think Beth is in our group. I learned this from Beth. Beth does that too. She'll just change it change it to take a B flat and put it in F, or F to B flat, or whatever it is. So I guess I kind of learned that you can kind of, in this style, you can kind of change the keys if it works a little bit better for you. And I think on some of the ones that do go up into third position, if you encounter that, I would just look at playing it in another key if you're not comfortable doing that. So the one thing that I also realized is Elmo's tunes are not found in other areas or collections. I always thought they were fairly unique. I wasn't running into them as I was, learning other kinds of styles. And again, Beth sent me an email not long ago and said, "Oh, I just got this book called Give a Coin to the Fiddler. You ought to get it." So, me, I'm quite compliant. So I bought the book, and I was just kind of leafing through it, and it's about traditional fiddling, and so I was just kind of skimming it so that I could, read more later. And one of the things that just sort of stopped me in my tracks was that she was saying that Norway had two styles of fiddling. There was a standard fiddle style, and there was the hardanger fiddle style. I just always assumed it was all hardanger fiddle, but I didn't realize there were two styles. And so she said that that Gudbrandsdalen had more of the standard fiddle style, and Hallingdal had the hardanger style. Elmo's family and all of his neighbors, they all came from Hallingdal, and the tunes that we're hearing, we're playing, a lot of us know, like from Leonard Finseth and that whole crowd, those are coming from Gudbrandsdalen. And I don't have to be like this really, I didn't have to be all that much of an intrepid investigator. I could just simply look at Waltz from Fla Hallingdal versus Gudbrandsdalen Schottish after Leonard Finseth. So it was rather obvious. So at any rate, I think this also should be investigated a little more, but I think it's interesting to note that if the people who came to an area came from a part of Norway that had a standard fiddle style, they might have different tunes and different styles than the people who came from the part of Norway that had more of a hardanger style. So I think that's why Elmo's music sounds to me more unique, and some of the tunes are unique and we don't hear them in some of the other collections. And here's where Gudbrandsdalen and Hallingdal are. They're not that far away, but they do represent, culturally, they do represent a couple different styles, according to Lori Hart, who wrote this book. So stay tuned. We'll learn more about this. The other thing I thought was really cool was Elmo's work was a collection done by a fiddler, and the volunteers were all fiddlers. I mean, and it's all about fiddlers. It's like we don't always see that. We don't always pay attention to that. But a lot of the work that's done in this area, they were all fiddlers. This is his grandpa and his dad, and Elmo on the bottom there. And so he was the fiddler's fiddler. And so a lot of these collections are done by folklorists, by people who have other musical experiences, and there's nothing wrong with that. These are very intelligent people, and I've learned a whole lot. But I think there's just something a little different. If you're a fiddler looking for fiddle tunes and you're learning or getting the information from another fiddler, I think there's just something kind of special about that. The other really cool thing is that Elmo's notes tell us which tunes are the older traditional ones that Walter was talking about, which are the second generation, and which one are more contemporary. And there's the example, another example, much like what Walter said. We found these notes all the time. We could tell this was an older tune because he heard his grandfather. Well, then Walter could say, well, when did Grandpa live? So here's the birth and death dates. This is when the tune was 1929. Elmo was just a little one. He would have been 5, and he would have been remembering his grandfather hear this and play this, and where and what was the context. So many times we collect these tunes, and even the fiddlers aren't quite sure where they got them from. We don't have a context. We don't know how old they are. We don't have all this information. And Elmo did a really good job so that we get a good idea. In this book, you can tell whether you're playing an older, more traditional tune, whether you've got something that's coming, more in that 30s, 40s, or do you have something that's a little more contemporary? And I just want to talk a little bit about circles of tradition. And this is something that I learned because I had the opportunity to audit a folklore class at the University of Wisconsin from Dr. Anna Rue. And just for those of you who hang out with me a lot, this means that I will become pretty much unbearable for quite some time. I'm warning you now. But at any rate, this was something that was in one of the articles she had us read, and I just thought it was really cool, and I think it really pertained to Elmo. It was a concept of circles of tradition. It was an article written by, I think it was William Moore. It was actually about Minnesota folk artists. And the concept of the circles of tradition was, sometimes we talk about music as authentic or it's not authentic. And that just sounded kind of judgmental. And so what he's talking about was that the traditions are celebrated, perceived, or integrated. So the concept of being integrated is those are people that we might call culture bearers, people whose the art form, like in this case, the fiddling, they're fully interwoven as a part of their community life. And Elmo was definitely an integrated traditionalist with his fiddle playing. He grew up in a fiddle family. He learned it as a kid. He was out there playing. This was just a part of his life. The perceived traditions are people where it's not totally integrated in your community life, but it's part of your tradition. You can say, boy, like you might be Norwegian and you love this music and this is what you want to play. And so it's part of your tradition. And for me, I feel like I'm in a perceived tradition. I grew up in the upper Midwest. I'm a Wisconsin girl. I lived in Minnesota. I've spent time in eastern Nebraska, in South Dakota. I've been in all over, all these places I've been and I've lived, and I kind of grew up with a lot of this music. So for me, this is a perceived tradition. I didn't grow up living all these traditions, but I feel like this is a part of my heritage. And then there's celebrated traditions. And that is most of what we do. If for our own personal and aesthetic reasons, we choose to practice something that's just not part of our own heritage. We happen to think that Cajun music is cool. We feel like going to an Irish jam. I've been reading a lot about Missouri fiddlers. I am not of any of those traditions, but I think they're fun. And in that case, I'm celebrating a tradition. So in the case of Elmo, he was definitely integrated when he was playing his fiddle. He also played a lot of other stuff. He thought Irish music was great. When you look at all of his tunes, he played a little bit of everything. So when he wasn't playing his Norwegian music from, West Central Minnesota, then he was doing he was doing his celebrated traditions. So he was just, when he was just out there playing the stuff, then he was just celebrating a tradition. But he also did a perceived tradition. I did not realize until I was listening to some recent interviews that were just recently posted in the Mills Library, that Elmo didn't learn how to play the hardanger until he was retired. He remembered his grandfather playing it. He was proud of being Norwegian. He knew it was a Norwegian national, instrument. He always wanted to have one. So when he was retired, he got himself one, fixed it up, and played it. And he went to workshops and learned tunes from tune books, and that's how he learned it. So he was integrated in the fiddle, perceived in the hardanger, and then celebrated when he was playing all of his other music. So that if that is another way of kind of looking at, all of the different music and kind of all the complexity that we see in a lot of his stuff. I'm going to stop sharing. Phew. I got my graphic in. So, right. All right. Didn't leave a ton of time for questions here, but questions, comments, thoughts. You can unmute yourself and
Yeah, sorry. And quite a project. Congratulations. It's really, really nice. It's detailed and all the pictures and all the trails you all went down to find the information. So it's great to have this book, which is the summary of what you were just describing. So,
right. It's
yeah.
also fun to check out the YouTube playlist. And I'm always surprised. I go back there to see how many views a lot of these videos have gotten. They've been up forever, right?
And as far as the hardanger, that bridge is quite flat. So that's one of the main things. It's mainly as a double instrument, but it's not, in my view, as a huge crossover. It's a fiddle, so yeah. All right, that's all. Thank you. It's great. Great presentation.
Great.